Welcome to a moment of meditation. I am Patricia, the assistant chaplain here at the village. Today we're going to meditate on the second parable in this series called Knowing God from the Parables of Jesus. But we will begin with a related illustration that Jesus taught in Luke chapter 6, verses 43 to 45. Jesus says, "No good trees bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of the evil treasures produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks." The key verse here is each tree is known by its own fruit. Not only trees, but all the plants, including grass or grains. Today we know that the DNA of the plant determines its identity and what kind of fruit it yields. Figs can only be produced on fig trees, and grapes can only be found on grapevines. A young bramble bush may share some similarity with grapevine, but it will never produce grapes. So this passage is also a parable, even though a short and simple one. Jesus explains the lesson. Only a good person with a good heart can produce good deeds. An evil person gravitates toward evil. Whatever he does are wicked and harmful. Today we are going to meditate on the parable of the wheat and the tares, found in Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 to 30, shortly after Jesus told the parable of the sower we studied last time. This parable is similar in that it is also about sowers sowing seeds. I will read for you from the New American Standard Bible. Here is Matthew 13, starting from verse 24. "He presented another parable to them, saying, 'The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares also among the wheat and went away. But when the wheat sprang up and bore grain, then the tares became evident also. And the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, "Sir, did you not sow good seeds in your field? How then does it have tares?" And he said to them, "An enemy has done this." And the slave said to him, "Do you want us then to go and gather them up?" But he said, "No, lest while you are gathering up the tares, you may root up the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest, and in the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, first gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheat into my barn." The parable of the wheat and the tares is only found in the Gospel of Matthew. It is obvious that wheat is the good seed. What are tares? It is not a word we use today. Tares are weeds, such as ryegrass that are found in grain fields. These are undesirable elements. In the newer English translations, such as the ESV Bible, from which I normally quote, we find the words weeds instead of tares. But because weeds and wheats sound so much alike, I decided to quote from the NAS, or New American Standard Bible, so there will be no confusion. In this parable, the good seeds of the wheat were sown in good soil. But the master of the field was not the only sower. In the middle of the night, his enemy came and sowed tares, the seeds of weeds, among the wheat. That was done in the dark when no one was aware. When the wheat sprang up and bore grain, then the tares became evident also. It became especially obvious because the grains looked different. The slaves or the servants were puzzled. Where did the tares come from? But the master knew. An enemy had done this, he explained. The slave offered to pull out the tares, but the master said, "No, lest while you are gathering up the tares, you may root up the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest." So far we have noticed several things. Number one, this parable is about the kingdom of heaven. We need to find out more. Secondly, the master of the field was the sower of the good seeds of wheat. The master had an enemy who came secretly to sow tares among the wheat. The master's priority was the well-being of the wheat, that nothing should interfere with their growing and their maturing to yield grains. And because of that, he was patient to allow the tares to coexist with the wheat while they were growing. Before we get to the end of the parable, let's see how Jesus explained the parable to his disciples. I will read from verses 36 to 43. Then he left the multitudes and went into the house. And his disciples came to him saying, "Explain to us the parable of the tares of the field." And he answered and said, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man, and the field is the world. And as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom, and the tares are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. He who has ears, let him hear." What can we observe here? First, Jesus was telling the parable to multitudes. Some were believers, but others were folks who just wanted to find out more about this popular street preacher. And his disciples were mingling with the crowd. Jesus was teaching all of them. Now he explained the parable to his disciples. He said, "The one who sowed the seed, the good seed, is the Son of Man, Jesus himself. The field is a world. And as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom. And the tares are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil." Bible scholars debate about how this parable should be applied. Is it about the church, that there are evil people mixed in with true believers and servants of God? Is it speaking to how church leaders should mete out disciplinary measures in the church? But Jesus was speaking to the multitude, and he explicitly explained that the field is the world. The whole world is his, even before the sowing. He is showing how the kingdom of heaven emerges and develops into maturity amid opposition from enemies, even the devil himself. Although we are clear that this parable is not pertaining to governing or discipline of the Christian church, we cannot forget that in the actual church, there will always be a mingling of good and evil, of true believers and impostors, even false prophets like wolves in sheepskin, trying to lure the young believers away. We need to be vigilant like good shepherds, yet be patient, lest while we pluck out the tares, we are also uprooting the good wheat. Now we should turn our attention to the harvest. We read in verse 30 where Jesus said, "Allow both to grow together until the harvest, and in the time of the harvest I will say to the reaper, first gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheat into my barn." When the plants are mature, it is easy to tell by the grains which are wheat and which are tares. The reapers are instructed to gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up because they are worthless, even poisonous. But the wheat are gathered into the barn. Then Jesus gave the explanation in verses 40 to 43. He said, "So shall it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. In that place there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father." While the wheat and the tares are intermingled during growth, they will be separated at the end of the age when Christ will return. What is described here is the last judgment, when the tares, the sons of the evil one, will be gathered and removed from God's kingdom. Jesus mentioned two types. The stumbling blocks are men whose evil has been a snare to others, and the less guilty, those simply called who commit lawlessness. But by nature they are all tares, not wheat. They will be cast into the fire, burnt up. The fire is not only in this parable, but also in Jesus' interpretation of the parable. He added the clause, "In that place there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." This is the most horrific and awful ending of the tares. We will do well to take the warning of Jesus seriously. So this is the parable of the wheat and the tares, also called the parable of the weeds among the wheat. What can we take away from this parable? It would be good if you can take a little time after this to reflect on this parable and come up with your own takeaway. But I thought I would share with you what I have learned. First, the whole world belongs to God, every inch of it. This gives me new eyes to the environment, the land and the seas, all the terrains. If we believe in Jesus and God's word, then we are the good seeds. He planted us in good soil, and we grow and sprout and bear fruit. But always, Satan sowed his evil seeds, which are mingled with God's people. That has been the way of the human reality and will continue to be until the end of the age. This is true in the human society in general, but also for the Christian church. But God is patient. His top priority is for the growth and flourishing of his people. That is why he allows the mingling of the tares and the wheat until they are mature enough to be separated for good. The end of the tares, the evil sons of Satan, is eternal destruction. But the sons of God will enjoy eternal life in the kingdom of heaven, glowing with splendor of holiness without any contaminants. The song for today is called "Satan, the Seed is Sowing," written in the late 19th century and not familiar at all, not even to me. But the tune is easy to catch on, and it summarizes this parable. Please join in with Dan Stokes leading us.
Satan the tares is sowing, so earnestly sowing, and with the wheat they're growing, together growing here, and the angels will gather by and by, the wheat for the garner of the Master on high. The angels will gather by and by, the wheat will gather by and by, by and by, the wheat for the garner of the Master on high. The angels will gather by and by, the wheat for the garner of the Master on high. Yes, he the wheat is keeping, so lovingly keeping, safe for the time of reaping, for God is built above, and the angels will gather by and by, the wheat for the garner of the Master on high. The angels will gather by and by, the wheat for the Master of the Master on high. When he the wheat doth sever, eternally sever, may we be his forever, to sing his grace and love, and the angels will gather by and by, the wheat for the garner of the Master on high. The angels will gather by and by, the wheat for the garner of the Master on high.
Receive the benediction from 1 John chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. Thanks be to God.